My husband John turned our marriage into a lie. I promise I'll change, he said after I caught him cheating again. Now with 2 kids and a broken heart, I'm torn. Should I stay in this facade or fight for my freedom? The truth is haunting and I'm lost. A 27-year-old female met my now husband John, a 28-year-old male, through a dating application in late 2016. I will admit that our relationship progressed quite rapidly. Within a few months of dating, he moved in with me and my family. I persuaded my parents to allow him to take the spare room while he got back on his feet. Other than that, things had been relatively normal for us, but around mid-2017 I discovered that he was being unfaithful. He had been acting strangely protective of his phone, among other things, so I found an opportunity to snoop. I discovered several nude photographs of his ex saved on his phone. When I confronted him, he deleted them in front of me and insisted he had simply forgotten that he ever had them. Although I did not completely believe him, I chose to let it go. However, only a couple of months later, I again found the images saved in a different location on his phone, think emails or something similar. When I confronted him once more, he broke down in tears and claimed he had a problem, insisting he would seek help, essentially suggesting he was addicted to pornography. I ended the relationship at that point, but eventually found myself back with him after several months of on and off communication. He promised that he had learned his lesson and that he had completely erased all images of his ex from his phone, computer, and so on. At this stage in my life, I was primarily focused on moving out of my family home and becoming independent, so I agreed to find a place together while we worked on our relationship. However, that plan fell apart rather quickly. Everything seemed stable until I learned that he had resumed contact with his ex. I discovered conversations between them in which they exchanged nude photographs and sexual messages, and I completely lost it. For months, I had been trying to rebuild my trust in him, and he had genuinely seemed to be turning over a new leaf. We were both working stable jobs, saving money, and appeared to be aligned in our life goals. I had genuinely allowed myself to believe that things would be okay between us, and that I could let go of his past mistakes. We broke up again, but I could not move out since we were still under a lease together. We shared a living space, but at that point, I was only treating him as a roommate. At one point during this break, John had a few friends over. I was lounging at home when they arrived, and I had dressed for company, so I felt a little embarrassed. As they passed by me, Brian, one of John's friends, smacked my backside and made a disrespectful comment. I was taken aback and looked at John to see if he would intervene. John merely laughed and told Brian not to do that. He did not scold Brian, did not apologize for his behavior, nothing. I simply returned to my room, feeling my feelings toward John harden further. At some point in mid-2018, while still stuck in this lease, John brought his ex to the apartment. I am uncertain how long he and his ex had been in contact at that point or if they had developed a relationship, but I suspected they had some sort of arrangement between them. His ex was friendly with me and eventually mentioned that she knew I was bisexual. She asked if I had ever explored that aspect of my sexuality and suggested that we explore it together. I was initially resistant, but she continued to assert that she and John were not together, had not been intimate, and had no intentions of doing so in the future. I felt compelled to get revenge for how much John had hurt me, so I went along with it. It unfolded as expected. I fell into a deep depression, trapped in this apartment with my ex, seeking relief through recreational activities and sleeping with his ex, until I felt like a mere shadow of my former self. I tried to convince myself that I was no longer hurt by the situation and that, since John and I were not together any longer, it should not bother me. However, eventually discovering John in bed with his ex shattered me even more, even if it did not surprise me in the slightest. At some point, Brian, the friend I mentioned previously, contacted me asking for help with his computer. For context, I am quite adept with computers and have built a few. I went to his apartment to assist him, but while there, Brian relentlessly flirted with me, and in a moment of anger and resentment, I decided to sleep with him as revenge. It did not change anything, but looking back, I cannot bring myself to regret it. By the end of 2018, I reconnected with an old flame, Mike. Mike and I had seen each other intermittently in 2016 before John, but the timing had not been right for us then. At that time, Mike was unemployed, living with family, and not prepared to commit to a full-time relationship. However, now in 2018, he claimed he was ready. We dated for 9 months, and it was a dream come true. During this time, the lease on the apartment John and I shared concluded, and I asked Mike if he would consider moving in together. At that point, I had not disclosed anything about John to Mike. It did not seem necessary, especially since John felt more like a stranger to me by that time. Mike expressed that it seemed too soon, stating that finding an apartment would be difficult for him. He mentioned having poor credit, low savings, and that he would not be able to meet the income requirements in our area. I understood this, as John and I had only been able to afford our place because we had roommates, so I dropped the subject. I considered moving back in with my family, But at that time, some of my siblings had returned home due to job losses and other issues, and I realized it would only further stretch my parents. I agreed to extend my lease for another year, but made it clear to John that, since I was in a new relationship, there would be no chance of reconciliation, as he frequently tried to convince me to pursue. By mid-2019, while still dating Mike, I began to pick apart our relationship. I had always wished to have children, to be a stay-at-home mother, and I wanted to know if Mike shared the same expectations. We were 9 months into our relationship, and it felt like the right time to inquire. Mike was perfect in every way, our personalities meshed seamlessly, our humor was aligned, it felt as if we were made for one another. I wanted so much for us to be on the same page, so I was distressed when he revealed he did not envision a scenario in which his wife would be a stay-at-home mother. He also admitted that he was still uncertain about what he wanted out of life, what career path he wanted to pursue, and whether he even wanted children. Mike was 7 years older than I was, so I found it hard to believe that a nearly 30-year-old man had not figured out his goals in life. Although I had previously known that Mike had been in and out of part-time jobs and was still living with family, it did not hit me until that conversation that Mike would not be dependable. What if I became pregnant? What if I became homeless? I realized that he would not be the one to support me, and it shattered my idealization of him for a moment. That night, in a moment of weakness, I slept with John for the first time in a very long while. I cannot explain what led to that decision, but after that night I recognized that between Mike and John, John seemed to be the more stable choice. He had a career now despite being younger than Mike, and he had savings. Furthermore, he wanted the same things I did: children and a stay-at-home wife. He wished to be a provider, and that had always been my desire. Mike and I broke up, and I rekindled my relationship with John. Shortly after getting back together with John, I discovered I was pregnant. At that point, I was unsure whether it was John's or Mike's child. John was aware of my uncertainty and reassured me that he would accept the child regardless of paternity. I felt too embarrassed to contact Mike about this, so I refrained. We proceeded with the pregnancy, and a few months before my due date in 2020, John and I decided to get married. Our child was born later that year, and it was abundantly clear that John was the father. John and Mike have no physical similarity. Think blonde hair versus dark brown hair and various distinct facial features. During the first year or two of our child's life, John and I immersed ourselves in our work. Eventually, we moved back in with my parents to save for a home of our own. My parents cared for our baby whenever both of us were working, and they also alleviated our financial burden by covering rent and other bills. By 2022, we were finally able to buy our home. Things had been fairly normal for us until sometime in 2023. It was blissful, even happy. My parents had supported me greatly during the challenges of being a first-time parent. While it was lonely being at home with just our baby, I appreciated how hard John worked for our family, working 8 to 10-hour days, coming home exhausted, and handing over his paychecks to me so I could allocate the funds for our bills and mortgage. He never complained, and I was happy to dedicate so much time to managing our home, caring for our child, and attending to him. I had meals prepared before he arrived and packed lunches before he left for work. We fell into a rhythm that seemed beneficial for both of us. Then he began to pressure me about having threesomes. I repeatedly declined, regardless of how often he insisted that things were becoming stale in the bedroom. I could argue that we were both tired. He often refused me because he was drained from work, and I was exhausted from caring for our now toddler all alone. This did not even account for all the babysitting I was doing for my siblings who lived nearby. John would drop the subject for a week or so, but would then resume his pleas. I started to suspect that he was cheating again and that perhaps he was referring to his ex. He swore that this was not the case and that he did not have anyone specific in mind. He even said I could find the third party on my own as long as it was a woman. After several weeks of persuasion, I finally agreed to search for someone. I had little success finding anyone through dating applications, which relieved me. I shared this with him until he eventually broke down and asked if I could at least convince someone to let him watch. I was disgusted by this request, but he assured me he would not ask for anything else, that this was all he wanted. So after some searching, I eventually found someone. It was not particularly enjoyable for me, but the woman requested that I consider becoming her third, with her husband involved. I declined, but the woman asked that I keep her contact information just in case I changed my mind. We continued in this manner for a while, finding women who were comfortable with John watching. I will admit that John is not very attractive. Between myself and his ex, he had not managed to sleep with anyone else. While no one had backed out after seeing John, he certainly could not convince any of these women to let him participate either. Eventually, our bedroom activities fizzled out as he grew bored of merely watching, but our own sexual life did not improve. After all of this, I decided to snoop through his belongings again, and this is when I discovered he had resumed cheating with his ex. When I confronted him, He broke down and confessed that he had been cheating on me with her since the day after our wedding 3 years prior. I was utterly devastated by this revelation. Even though things had been strained in our relationship, I never imagined that throughout this entire time he had been unfaithful. We had built so much together over the past 3 years, we had a home and a child together. I confronted him angrily, and he continued to reiterate the same excuses, that he had a problem, that he would seek help, that he would cut her off and would never do it again. I shut him out and decided to contact his ex. I explained that he and I were now married with children, hoping perhaps she was unaware of his situation. However, she scoffed at me, mocked me for my anger, and told me she had no intention of stopping her involvement with him. I engaged in some unsavory actions after that, but to keep it brief, his ex has had him blocked since 2023, and he has been unable to successfully contact her since. This brings me to 2024. We had just welcomed our second child, and the unhappiness and strain between us continued. We agreed to open our relationship for a brief period, allowing us to pursue whomever we wanted, in hopes that it might help our marriage. During this period, I reconnected with old hookups I had before John and contacted that one woman to try out the aforementioned threesome with her husband. It felt wrong for a while, but John made it clear to me that he was actively pursuing people, both at work and through applications. During this time, I rekindled my connection with Mike. It felt as if we were picking up where we left off, and during this period, I sensed that I was regaining my old self, the person before marriage and children, before all of these obligations. I am ashamed to admit that I chose not to tell him any of this. To this day, Mike does not know that I am married and have children. There have been a few occasions when I jokingly asked him what he would do if I secretly had kids. Would he stay with me? He immediately laughed and said, "Hell no." So I knew my answer then. When the month was over, John and I closed the open relationship again. He confided that he had not managed to connect with anyone. During that conversation, he expressed that he would be fine with me continuing to have hookups with women only if it would fulfill a need for me that he could not satisfy. I agreed to this, although I did not genuinely intend to do so. Then he was fired from his job, and it came to light that it was due to allegations of sexual harassment against his female coworkers. Even before we opened our relationship, John had been persistently attempting to flirt and obtain phone numbers from female colleagues, which led to several resignations. One brave individual finally reported him, resulting in his termination. I could not believe he had done that, especially since it jeopardized our family and home. He was able to find a new job within a couple of months, during which we relied on our emergency savings to stay afloat. However, my frustration with him grew, leading me to maintain contact with Mike. Mike and I had experienced an on-again, off-again relationship since 2016, and after our 9-month stint in 2018-2019, I still recognized that Mike would not be able to provide for me and my children even if he were aware of them. He remained in a cycle of part-time work and living with family, yet he offered me emotional support and reminded me of a simpler time and a simpler version of myself. Talking to him was significantly better than trying to elicit any emotional connection from my husband. Ultimately, we began meeting for hookups, Mike and I, typically in one of our cars. I explained that I did not have my place, that I had a roommate and lacked privacy, and he accepted that explanation. Toward the end of the year, we arranged to meet at a hotel. We shared a night together, had dinner, and behaved as if we were living together. I told John that I was meeting up with a girlfriend and would spend the night due to drinking. I suspect John did not believe me, but he did not stop me from going. This was the last night Mike and I spent together. He ghosted me the day after we parted ways, blocked me on everything, and did not respond to any of my calls or messages until recently. He explained that he had ghosted me because he had become anxious about how perfect the night had been, fearing he could not bear the thought of returning to sneaking around and having encounters in our vehicles. I was uncertain how to feel about that. For a brief moment, I wondered if he was aware of our affair. However, I assured him repeatedly that this was not the case. I am grappling with the knowledge that my marriage was over even before it began, and that I made a mistake in choosing to be with John over Mike. While I cannot regret having my children, who are the joys of my life, I cannot continue as I am. I have raised the subject of divorce with John multiple times. We have engaged in discussions where I pleaded with him to be more emotionally present prior to finding out about his infidelity. He works a significant amount, and I have always understood that, but he is rarely engaged with our children, seldom participates in parenting beyond occasionally playing with them, and rarely converses with me beyond sharing funny videos or complaining about work. I suggested returning to work, but childcare is expensive, and he claims it is unnecessary. I am beginning to realize that he has essentially allowed me to become financially reliant on him, which I understand I asked for when we first married. but it has made it impossible for me to contribute or gain financial independence. When I mention divorce, John completely loses his temper. He claims he will never find love again, asserting that women do not find him appealing and insists that I am the best he could ever have. When pressed further, he threatens to inform the courts that I have a drug problem and use drugs around our children. I do not do this, but it certainly silences me. I could never risk losing my children, they are all I have. I have spoken to my parents and received a mixed response. My father supports my moving back, assuring me he will do what he can for my children and that I can focus on getting back on my feet and establishing my own savings. However, my mother is already overwhelmed from supporting my siblings during their tough times and insists I should work things out with John. Of course, I have not disclosed the entire story to them. All they know is that I am unhappy. I do not know what to do. I am torn between attempting to convince John to reopen the marriage or proceeding with a divorce. And if I choose to pursue a divorce, I recognize there are many safety nets I must establish beforehand. I wonder if I should wait until my older child starts school, which should be in the next year, before I try to re-enter the workforce. But then what? Do I uproot my children from everything they know? All their needs are met. John provides for us without complaint, ensuring our children receive plenty of toys and clothing. How could I take them away from this? Any advice would be appreciated. Summary: my husband is a habitual cheater, and it has reached a point where even after marriage and children, he has continued seeking ways to be unfaithful. This has led me to begin my own extramarital affairs, and I am filled with guilt over the situation. Story 2. My husband's family once embraced me, but now they've turned me into a punching bag. After my false pregnancy, my mill screamed, "You've robbed me of a grandchild." My husband feels guilty for defending me. Can our love survive this toxic family turmoil? My husband, 32 years old, and I, 28 years old, share a wonderful relationship, but his family, who once embraced me as one of their own, has turned against me in painful and hurtful ways, especially following a recent health scare. I do not know how much longer I can endure this situation, even though I love him with all my heart. My husband and I have been together for 4 years and married for 2. We met when I was hired to plan his sister's wedding, and we clicked instantly. While we maintained professionalism during the wedding, we began dating afterward. From the outset, our relationship felt magical. It was profoundly respectful, loving, supportive, and safe. It is truly one of the most beautiful aspects of my life. Over time, I also became close to his family. His mother felt like a second mother to me, his younger sisters were like dear friends, and although their family dynamic was rooted in hardship, it felt strong and warm. The only person who seemed off was his aunt, but I did not pay much attention to her. I genuinely enjoyed being part of their world until he proposed. The proposal was everything I had ever dreamed of. A beautiful trip, a perfect moment, pure joy. However, something changed when we returned home. His mother, who had previously been my confidant, suddenly became different, subtly cold and passive-aggressive. I noticed the shift but brushed it off in the glow of my engagement. Looking back, I wish I had not ignored it. Since then, things have only deteriorated. I have cried every day for over a year now. I do not think there has been a single day without tears. The atmosphere has become so toxic and painful that I have begun to question whether I can remain in this marriage, not because I do not love my husband, but because of how his family makes me feel. Some background: my husband has 3 sisters, one is older, married, and 2 are younger. His father passed away when he was very young and they grew up in severe poverty. His mother worked 5 jobs to support them, and his maternal uncle helped them immensely, which likely explains the close bond between his mother and aunt, his uncle's wife. Ever since my husband began working at the age of 23, he has been the sole provider for his family. He pays for the expenses of his mother, aunt, uncle, and one of his sisters. Today, the family is relatively well off, largely due to him. They love him, of course, but often treat him like a cash machine. Yet he never complains, he simply gives and gives. I always admired his loyalty and deep love for his family. But now, I find myself unsure of how to feel. The very same people who claim to love him have caused me more pain than I can bear. Here are some examples of their behavior. After our engagement, his mother began making strange comments such as, "I will have to visit more often to check on him now that he has more responsibilities." She even told him, "If I do not take care of him, who will? Me." During wedding planning, my husband jokingly expressed a desire to elope. His mother remarked, "A good life partner should encourage sharing love with family, not separating you from them," despite our intention to include everyone. On our wedding day, she told me, "I know you will never be as good as I am at caring for my son. However, I will not expect that from you. I will try to guide you and hope you find happiness in this marriage." Then she hugged me and added that she hoped her son manages to be happy with me. We postponed our honeymoon for unrelated reasons. When his sister showed up at her house amid a crisis, her marriage was toxic, we were expected to cancel our plans entirely to support her. We were open to staying, but the hypocrisy was astounding. They constantly called me an outsider, yet I was suddenly expected to step up. During this crisis, I grew close to that same sister. I even helped her secure a job on my event planning team and recommended a therapist she seemed to like. She told me she was happier than she had been in years. Yet suddenly my mother-in-law accused me of manipulating her into thinking something was wrong and forcing her to go to therapy. She made her quit the job and stop seeing the therapist. Her aunt claimed I cared more about my business than her emotions. The sister now refuses to speak to me and makes passive-aggressive comments. Once I had to travel out of the city for work, and during that time my husband fell seriously ill, extremely sick. I was frantic, continuously calling him and texting but received no response. My anxiety escalated throughout the night. Later, I discovered that his mother had turned off his phone to avoid any disturbances. While I can understand her desire to let him rest, what hurt me was that she did not reply to any of my 60 messages. She did, however, message his secretary to inform him of my husband's condition, demonstrating that she had the means to communicate but lacked the will to inform me, his wife. I did not learn the full extent of his condition until I returned the next day and found out he had been admitted to the hospital. I broke down in tears the moment I saw him. In that moment of heartbreak, my mother-in-law thought it was an appropriate time to lecture me on balancing work and personal life. I am still processing that day. One of the younger sisters had a boyfriend who cheated on her with someone he met at one of my events. When the aunt found out, she accused me of knowing about the infidelity and keeping it from them to harm the sister. Fortunately, no one believed that absurdity, not even my mother-in-law. However, the most painful moment came just 3 weeks ago. I thought I was pregnant. My husband and I took 3 tests, all of which were positive. We were terrified but thrilled. I wanted to wait to consult my usual obstetrician gynecologist, who was out of town for a week, before confirming it with a scan or blood test, but I was so excited that I confided in close friends and family, including his younger sisters and mother-in-law. For the first time in years, his mother was kind and supportive, and even the aunt congratulated me. That night, I cried not only because I was going to be a mother, but also because I thought I had finally regained their affection. I believed we were once again a family. My aunt-in-law recommended a doctor whom we visited. There, we learned that I was not pregnant and that it was a false positive. But that's not all. A scan revealed an ovarian cyst, and due to an accident I had a few years ago which caused a miscarriage, I might face fertility issues in the future. I was devastated. My husband was heartbroken. We cried and held each other for hours. He protected me fiercely, not allowing anyone to visit or bombard me with questions. We needed space to grieve. When his mother found out, she cried, not out of empathy, but because her son had lied to her when he told her everything was all right. He lied for me because I asked him to provide me with time and privacy. She screamed at me for robbing her of the joy of being a grandmother. She accused me of denying her a grandchild and stated that she would not accept me as her daughter-in-law unless I gave her an heir. I was too emotionally drained to respond. 3 days ago, my husband and I visited my gynecologist, the one I trust and have seen for years. She took the time to explain everything to us in detail: the false positives, the cyst, my current fertility concerns. She answered all our questions with incredible compassion. Afterward, I broke down and cried in her arms for an hour. During that time, I kept wishing it was my mother-in-law comforting me instead. Because before all of this, before the engagement and the shift in her behavior, she would have hugged me, loved me, and supported me. I needed her so much in that moment, and I still do. But she is not that person anymore, and I do not understand why. We live in the same building, making no contact nearly impossible. My husband has tried everything. He has defended me, prohibited the older sister from visiting our home, and confronted every person who wronged me. He even yelled at his mother when she mentioned disowning me, but she fainted. He feels guilty, and now so do I. He is emotionally exhausted as well. He cried with me when I told him I felt incapable of surviving in this family. He wonders if they even truly love him, as they cannot support the one thing he chose for himself, me. That realization tore me apart. Because despite everything, I love him more than anything. He is my peace and comfort. No matter how broken I feel, his voice brings me calm. Yet I am drowning. I wake up sad every day. I cry constantly. I feel as though my life is a nightmare from which I cannot escape. I do not want a divorce. However, I do not want to live this way either. I desire his family to love me the way I loved them. I want things to return to how they once were. I want to feel happy again. I want to feel that I matter. Right now, I feel lost. I truly need advice. What can I do in this situation? I feel as though I have tried everything. I have been patient, kind, stood up for myself, and my husband has defended me, yet it is never enough. They keep pushing, they keep hurting me, and I am starting to break. I do not want to lose my husband. He is the love of my life, but I also do not want to keep living like this. I feel as though I am being slowly erased from a home that should have felt like mine, too. Is there any way to fix this? Is there anything left for me to try? How do I protect myself without harming the man I love? And if there is no way out, how do I find the strength to walk away from someone who has never hurt me but whose family will not cease? Please be honest, I do not know how much more I can withstand. Summary. I was once incredibly close to my husband's family, particularly his mother. Since our engagement, his mother, aunt, and sister have turned against me. After experiencing a false positive pregnancy test, we discovered I have an ovarian cyst and fertility issues. My mother-in-law accused me of robbing her of a grandchild and stated that she would not accept me anymore. I love my husband, but I am emotionally exhausted and feel suffocated in this situation. I am overwhelmed with sadness and anxiety every day. What weighs on me the most is that I once loved his family. I miss the connection we had. I yearn for them to love me the way I loved them. But I do not know whether to stay or leave. I will write this here as I am unsure how to update a post or pin a comment. Okay, it is done. We are moving out but will remain in the same city. We have already found an apartment that is about 20 minutes from our current residence, so we are moving there for the time being. It is not too far, but it is a step forward. Concerning the severing of ties, my husband informed me that his father asked him to care for his mother and sisters, which has always weighed heavily upon him. As a result, he will not withdraw financial support just yet but will cease unnecessary interactions with them. My younger sister-in-law is a bit wary about our move, but his uncle supports our decision, so I hope that works out. He has also decided to write a letter to inform her and the aunt about our decision instead of telling them verbally for obvious reasons. My only concern is that he does not recognize how she is not just a bad mother-in-law, but also a bad mother for manipulating his emotions for so long. He will begin therapy, which I hope will be beneficial. I feel so bad for him. Even now, he is fearful that I will divorce him, which I will not, as I have realized that such an action would abandon him to fend off these people alone, and I will not do that. I currently have 4 concerns. 1. How do we leave without her noticing? My husband is writing his letter and will give it to his uncle instead of directly handing it to his mother. I will finish packing within a few hours, but I am afraid she will see us, scream at me, faint, and injure herself on the pavement or something. One of my friends suggested that she might have a heart attack given her hypertension issues. That would be extreme, and regardless of what she has done, I do not want her to die or injure herself. How can we soften the blow a bit? 2. If I become pregnant, which is unlikely, and she becomes extremely kind again, should I forgive and forget or hold on to the grudge? I think I might be inclined to let it go at that time, but I do not want to, especially since some have pointed out that she may pester me after I have children, and I do not want them exposed to that behavior. 3. How do I help my husband realize that he is being taken advantage of and that these people are not good influences? I once believed that they were good people who simply did not like me, but I was mistaken. It was painful to realize, but it was also necessary. I have noticed parallels between their behavior towards me and my husband. The only difference is that they attempt to exclude me from everything while including him. I worry that this dynamic will truly break him, as he loves his family so selflessly and endlessly. I question whether mere therapy will suffice. 4. Should we stop attending any gatherings where my mother-in-law and aunt will be present? Given their tendency to create conflict, I fear they will spread awful things about me. I understand it may seem trivial, but being disliked by people you love is taxing enough. I do not believe I want to endure similar comments from strangers. Furthermore, since my mother-in-law has said she will not acknowledge me as her daughter-in-law unless I provide her with a grandchild, I am effectively off the hook for now, right? I think so. Thank you all for your help. Honestly, these are basic steps we should have taken long ago, but it was hard to relinquish the idea of the perfect loving family that I had initially envisioned. I wanted to be a part of it so desperately because I believed that prior to my arrival, it truly was a happy and healthy family. I have come to accept that is not true, at least not for my husband. I also want to acknowledge the gut-wrenching position my husband is in. I know it is incredibly difficult for him. I will ensure I express how much I love him and that he is worth more than just the bills he pays. He is a kind and wonderful person who is an essential part of my life, and I am so grateful for him. I am oddly excited now. I find myself smiling while writing this and hopping around our room with clothes in my hands. Hopefully, we can create the life we envisioned when he proposed to me. Thank you again, I needed this push. Story 3. My boyfriend cheated on me with his best friend's fiancée while I was heartbroken over his past betrayal. I just wanted to feel desired, he claimed, as I found out through a video. Now I'm left packing my life away while he plays the victim. Why do I still miss him? I apologize for any errors. English is not my first language. I do not even know where to start. We were living together and everything was fine. Last year for Christmas, I invited him to my home because we spent the first Christmas with his family. At that time, we were experiencing a very difficult period in our relationship, right around our second anniversary. It was my first adult relationship, and I had always heard that around the 2-year mark, there is a defining moment, so I was hoping we would eventually get through that. He ultimately decided to go to his home country for Christmas due to his grandmother's declining health, and he was supposed to meet me in my home country afterward to spend New Year's Eve with my parents. This was the first time he was meeting them, and they were very excited. To make a long story short, while we were each with our own families, we started to reconnect and rekindle our relationship, or so I believed. Then he arrived in my country and met my family and friends. We were having a wonderful time, and it felt like we had overcome the rough patch. For a few days, it felt blissful. However, one day, as we were relaxing before going out with my friends for the last time before leaving my home country, his phone began to ring with an unknown girl's call. He had not given me any reason to distrust him before that, so I found it a bit odd but not alarming. What I found extremely suspicious was his attitude when I asked him who the girl was. He responded, "Oh, this random girl I met at a bar in my hometown that I have barely talked to. I have no idea why she is calling me." When he opened the conversation with her on Instagram, I saw many messages which I found highly suspicious, especially since we had barely talked, and it gave me a terrible feeling that he was lying to me. I asked him to show me the conversation, and he became very nervous, which confirmed my worst fears. He handed me his phone, and I discovered he had been chatting with this girl for over a month. The most memorable parts of their conversation included her sending him a photo of her breasts, to which he replied, "Oh, lovely photo," and he asked for another. She expressed how much she wanted to see him again, and he replied similarly. The comment that hurt me the most was that just a few days before Christmas, when I thought we were reconnecting, he texted her, "I woke up just to talk to you." Even though, due to the time difference, he was undoubtedly saying good morning to me. I felt sick to my stomach, and we still had a couple more days in my home country with my family. He gave me a weak excuse, claiming that it started when we were at the lowest point in our relationship, that he did not even like her, and that during those past few days with me, he was reminded of why we fell in love and how much he loved and cared for me. He also stated that he had no intention of meeting her, as he always felt unworthy of me and had low self-esteem, so he simply enjoyed the feeling of being desired. I did not want to make a big deal since my parents were excited he was there, and I did not want to ruin everything for them. Additionally, it was my last few days with my parents, so I did not want to spend them crying or have them worry about me. Thus, I acted as if everything was fine in front of them. When we boarded the plane to return home, a transatlantic flight, I cried and told him how much he had hurt me. He cried, expressing how sorry he was, how much he loved me, and how he did not want to lose me. After 12 hours cramped together without an escape, I foolishly decided to forgive him. It was true that we had been facing a rough patch, and he genuinely seemed remorseful for his actions. He had already informed the other girl that he had a girlfriend and apologized for leading her on, and he blocked her, which I verified, so yes, I forgave him. After a year filled with many lows as well as many highs, we were planning to go to his hometown for Christmas. He intended to leave a couple of weeks before me because I had to stay for work. The night before his departure, we had a terrible argument because I expressed that I felt uneasy recalling the previous year's events. Instead of reassuring me, we began to fight. He left, and I started to feel that it was the last time I would visit his home country, and I was honestly unsure about going. However, I ended up going because I did not want to spend Christmas alone. His family and friends had always been very kind to me. We spent a few days with them, and before leaving we stayed with his best friend. On the night before I left, we went out with his friend to the same place where he had met the girl he had been talking to. I was determined to enjoy myself, so I was drinking, dancing, and having fun. I went to the restroom and returned to find him talking to a girl. Just like that, and after having had quite a bit to drink, I lost my composure, began accusing him of cheating in front of everyone, and we got into a huge fight which escalated quickly. I took a taxi to his friend's house, and upon arriving in tears, his best friend's fiancé was there to comfort me, telling me how much of an idiot he was. He later came home and went to bed, and I could not see any way forward in the relationship, yet we still did not break up. The next day, I flew back home to a third country where we were living together, not my home country, and enjoyed a lovely New Year's Eve with my friends. We were texting sporadically, but everything seemed fine. Then on the day he was flying back, I woke up to a message from his best friend. It was a video of my then boyfriend making out with his fiancée, the woman who had been comforting me the previous day. Everything occurred inside their house while he, the best friend, was asleep upstairs. Talk about feeling betrayed. The best friend kicked him out the moment he saw that through the camera. It was an incredibly tumultuous experience. He did not end up flying back that day because he foolishly left his passport at the best friend's house, and he returned 3 days later. During those 3 days, I packed up my life into boxes while simultaneously crying uncontrollably and sending him hateful messages. With the help of some friends, I moved out, found a new place the day after I moved in, and it has been a whirlwind of emotions and experiences since. I often have a recurring nightmare of him cheating on me. However, today I finally had that same nightmare. We were at a bar with his friends, and this girl began flirting with him, which made me uncomfortable. He dismissed my feelings, calling me insane, and they ended up kissing, which always leaves me feeling terrible when I wake up. But today, the outcome was different. As soon as I saw the girl flirting with him and him being responsive, I just started laughing and walked out. I woke up feeling strange, still upset but somewhat less so. And that is all. I apologize for venting. I still do not understand why he did what he did, same excuse, saying how I could do much better than him and that he does not deserve me, how much he hates himself, etc. And I think I never will. I long for the day that I do not have to wake up feeling miserable, and to be honest, this has ruined relationships for me. I fell for him because he seemed different, kinder, and genuinely nice. But he turned out to be a complete fool and caused me so much pain, just as he claimed he never would.